you have this one flash, few seconds, life-threatening incident. But its effect lasts for a lifetime. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Soldiers who go through that, victims of sexual violence go through that. So all of this somehow changes the brain so profoundly that it lasts forever.
Stress hole
behavior থেকে তারপরে circuits in the brain, then the cells that make up the circuit, their connections, then molecules. These subjects have caste systems, our country especially, right? Engineer, doctor মানে মানুষ, মানে philosophy, history পড়ছে মানে বন মানুষ, right? এইরকম একটা ব্যাপার আছে তো মানে you're a loser basically, right? Why would you study philosophy, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Make Calcutta Relevant Again, the podcast. We're doing the unthinkable today. ভাবিনি এই জিনিসটা করব। আমি একজন সায়েন্টিস্টকে ধরে নিয়ে এসেছি আমাদের পডকাস্টে বলার জন্য, কারণ এরকম আমাদের কমেন্ট সেকশনে অনেক লোকজন লিখেছে যে তোমরা এত আর্টিস্ট, এত অন্টারপ্রেনিয়র, শেফ, ফুডের যে জগৎ থেকে লোকজনকে নিয়ে আসো, ফিল্যান্থ্রোপিস্টও নিয়ে চলে এসছো, কিন্তু একটাও সায়েন্টিস্টকে এখন অবধি আমরা নিয়ে আসতে পারিনি। কারণ আমরা বারবার ভয় পাই যে সায়েন্টিস্টরা এমন কিছু জিনিসপত্র বলবে সেটা হিব্রুর মতো মাথার উপর দিয়ে বেরিয়ে যাবে, উই উইল নট বি এবল টু আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ড অ্যান্ড আই উইল নট বি এবল টু বি এ ভেরি গুড হোস্ট। তারপর নিজেকে ইন্টিমিডেট করে নিয়ে এটা করা হয়নি। তারপরে খুব লাকিলি সোনাদার সাথে আলাপ, অ্যান্ড টার্নস আউট দ্যাট দিস জেন্টলম্যান ওয়ার্কস অন নিউরোসায়েন্স। নাও নিউরোসায়েন্স অবধি ব্যাপারটা বুঝি যে ঠিক আছে, নিউরোসায়েন্স মানে মাথার মস্তিষ্ক রিলেটেড জিনিসপত্র নিয়ে কথা হবে, কিন্তু এই ভদ্রলোক যে কাজটা করেন সেইটা যখন আমি রিয়েলাইজ করলাম যে কি, I got completely blown away. And it's very rare that my mind gets blown away by things that I see in Calcutta. I walked into his lab last week, which is right next door to our office at the Haldia Petrochemicals building, TCG Crest. This is where he runs his research lab called Chinta, and he's building human brains on a petri dish. Let's keep it to just that. Dr. Sumantra Chatterjee, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here.
And first things first, একটুখানি demystify what you do, knowing that full well that you're not just a scientist here, you're a storyteller, and that's the reason why we finally got the courage to get a scientist on the show. So firstly, welcome, and yes, would love to hear more about what you do.
Thanks for having me. So I study the brain, and especially when things go wrong, right? So there are two kinds of brain disorders that I've been interested in over my sort of work. First was stress. Stress affects us profoundly, especially younger people.
And more so now than ever.
Absolutely. And a particular aspect of stress that was understudied when I started, and that is the emotional symptoms, which are overpowering in stress disorders. When I moved from MIT back to Bangalore, the Tata Institute, what I noticed was a lot of people, big names in the field, had studied why stress causes cognitive impairment, learning and memory, rational thinking, executive decision making, which affects particular parts of the brain. But ask anybody and they'll tell you that one of the biggest things is high anxiety, high fear, unstable mood, emotional symptoms. And we knew that a brain area called the amygdala processes that emotional information, but what stress does to the amygdala was not understood at all. And I, being a rank outsider, I came from physics into neuroscience. I found that very odd, that gap in knowledge. So I asked around people, young experts in the field, and they said, it's not been done, you should do it. So that was my first foray into stress-related psychiatric disorders, particularly how it gives rise to abnormally high anxiety. Along the way in Bangalore, then I noticed that there are other ways of generating emotional symptoms. They don't have to be experiential, right? Stress is an experience. It can also happen because of genetics, right? You can inherit genes that hardwire your brain in such a way that you have emotional symptoms. And autism is one category where such things happen. Autistic kids are often impaired by high social anxiety and things like that. So I got interested in that part as well.
So neurodivergency.
And especially the amygdala again, how does it give rise to?
So অন্য যে neurodivergent symptoms that you say ADHD, এইটা কি it affects a very different part of the brain, or is it?
Yes, I mean these are all interlinked, but now we have a better understanding of which parts of the brain give rise to which symptoms predominantly. So cognition, cognitive function, cortex, hippocampus, amygdala gives rise to emotional symptoms. ADHD has other brain areas. So that was my second run at it in terms of, so if you can think of studying the brain from behavior, brain networks, circuits, neurons, brain cells, their connections, synapses, and then molecules that mediate synaptic signaling down to genes. You can study a problem across biological scale, from the whole organism down to genes. So stress was an experience that affects the whole organism. You get stressed and something happens and it percolates down.
Right.
I did that for 15
মানে
years.
তুমি কি বলছো যে স্ট্রেস হলে মানুষের জেনেটিক কম্পোজিশন বা
না।
মলিকিউলার
না।
লেভেলে কি এফেক্ট করে?
হ্যাঁ, করে, কিন্তু শুরু হচ্ছে বিহেভিয়ার থেকে, তারপরে circuits in the brain, then the cells that make up the circuit, their connections, then molecules.
Okay.
All of them happen together, but we study them by breaking them up.
Okay.
আমি ভাবলাম যে আরও অন্যভাবেও তো ইমোশনাল সিমটম হয়, জেনেটিক্স দিয়ে হতে পারে। So the first disturbance at the genetic level, and a mutation happens, such as Fragile X syndrome is a leading genetic cause of autism. And then that changes the synapse and the neurons and the connections and the circuits and the behavior. So you can think of stress being a top-down perturbation and genetics being a bottom-up perturbation, bottom being the genes and top being the behavior. So these are the two classes I worked on. But once I came to Calcutta, that all changed, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, so ওয়াও, প্রথম 5 মিনিটেই মাইন্ড অলরেডি ব্লোন। হ্যাঁ, এটা যে আমার এটা কোনো ধারণা ছিল না যে স্ট্রেস ক্যান অ্যাকচুয়ালি এফেক্ট ইউ অন এ molecular level, মানে তুমি
Profoundly.
profoundly. And over time does it get worse?
Very good question. So there are two kinds of broad stressors. One is one massive trauma happens.
Okay.
Like 9/11, something blows up, right? A natural calamity.
And on a first degree.
Yes, and also, crimes against an individual, right? Or you have an accident, right? You have this one flash, few seconds, life-threatening incident, and that is just contained in time, brief, a few minutes, but its effect lasts for a lifetime. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Soldiers who go through that, victims of sexual violence go through that. Famine can cause that as well, right? So all of this somehow changes the brain so profoundly that it lasts forever. Those things do change molecular composition of the cells as well. Now, you would notice that a trauma can happen to a population like 9/11 or the Bombay attacks. Not everybody develops PTSD after that. Some are more resilient than others. What is that? How is somebody more resilient and somebody more vulnerable? That's where genes come in. That maybe your genetic makeup and molecular makeup in the brain makes you more vulnerable or more robust against the same stress that affects somebody else very differently. So then you understand the architecture of the brain and how it's affected by stress, but then you also have to understand individual differences, which becomes much tougher.
Oof, our mind blown. I think this is going to be an episode where we just keep unlearning and relearning things about.
That's what I tell my
human brain.
students. Right. So in India, when I came back from MIT, there was no structured neuroscience program, undergraduate or postgraduate. So I had to make do with kids who are getting trained in other subjects.
তুমি বলেছিলে because you yourself come from physics.
I came from physics.
And you don't hire anybody else from like biology.
No,
Most of the
I have a bias, but let's not announce that, right? I mean, I have a bias because of my own experience, because I studied physics throughout into IIT Kanpur, which was a fantastic department, the best department in physics in those days. And yet my eyes were in neuroscience, but where do I go for neuroscience? I cannot. So I stuck with physics through masters in IIT Kanpur and could have continued in physics abroad, because those days, if you had an IIT Kanpur degree in physics, you had it made. You could go anywhere you want. Yet I did not apply for physics. I applied only for biology and biophysics and neuroscience. Because I wanted to make that jump. I had to switch at some point.
তুমি ওই সময় জানতে যে you wanted to work on the human brain.
I knew from high school.
You knew from high school.
I was reading away, but there was no internet. There's no email. Okay. There's no access to information. You get a few books. Kolkata book fair গিয়ে তিওয়ারির পেছনে ছুটে বেড়াচ্ছি। সেই তিওয়ারির দোকান ছিল গ্লোবের উল্টো দিকে। তিওয়ারি ওয়াজ মাই লাইফ লাইন। এই বইটা এসছে, এটা এনে দেবে, ওই বই পড়ে পড়ে যেটুকু জানো।
কি বই পড়তে ওই সময়?
I read, I think the first book I read which had a profound impact was Double Helix by Jim Watson, the discovery of the DNA structure, Watson and Crick. So that was the first time I saw that chemistry and physics can actually affect biology, right? The understanding of DNA structure was a profound discovery. Then I watched Jacob Bronowski. Jacob Bronowski was a pioneering thinker who wrote a book called Ascent of Man, the history of science and human evolution. That book was hugely impactful, and I think BBC had a series made out in which শান্তিনিকেতনে যেখানে পাঠভবনে পড়তাম সেখানে দেখানো হয়েছিল কয়েকবার. So that had big impact. My interests were switching. And then I had a remarkable father. Sumantra Chatterjee was a physicist in Shantiniketan, also trained abroad. He, despite being a theoretical physicist, was not a chauvinist. So he kept telling me that the future is in biology. If I started my career now, I would do biology. For me, that was huge, that a physicist telling me, these subjects have caste systems, our country especially, right? Engineer, doctor, মানে মানুষ, মানে philosophy, history পড়ছে মানে বন মানুষ, right? এইরকম একটা ব্যাপার আছে তো, মানে you're a loser basically, right? Why would you study philosophy, right? You have to be far more courageous and intelligent to study philosophy than becoming an engineer, right? It doesn't take that much courage to become an engineer. So ওই subject category, the classification, a caste system, and my father always told me that the future is now in biology. Physics has had its glory days, right? For coming from him gave me the assurance that this is okay, this is permissible behavior to deviate towards biology. And he would read the books with me. We would buy books together. বইমেলায় গিয়ে ছুটে ছুটে ঘুরে বেড়াতাম. তখনও কলেজ স্ট্রিটে বই টই পাওয়া যেত ঠিক তো. এখন তো গেলে শুধু পরীক্ষার বই দেয় দেখেছি.
ওগুলো চৌতা বই.
হ্যাঁ না, ওই দিচ্ছে কান্ট্রি মেডিকেল বই বললে মেডিকেল এক্সামিনের বই দিয়ে দিচ্ছে, মানে বায়োলজি বললে মেডিসিনের এক্সামিনের বই দিয়ে দিচ্ছে.
মুখস্থ করে নিয়ে ওটা খেয়ে তো বমি করতে হবে না.
বই মুখস্থ করতে পারতাম না বলেই ফিজিক্স পড়তাম. I was miserable in biology. I couldn't pass most of my exams in biology. কিন্তু ওই ট্রান্সফরমেশনটা হলো দেশে করা যেত না, তো দেশে
ওই সময় হয়তো দেশে
ফিজিক্স পড়ে আই অ্যাপ্লাইড টু জনস হপকিন্স.
তুমি বল্টিমোরে থাকতে?
হ্যাঁ, জনস হপকিন্স মাই চাইল্ডহুড অবসেশন. I wanted to be in Johns Hopkins to study. It was one of those things, and I did get a fellowship, which was quite.
And they're also huge in biology, right?
They're probably one of that hospital is just spectacular. So I got a fellowship in Johns Hopkins. So I took that and made a cold plunge into biophysics and biology from physics, having no biology whatsoever. And then reprogrammed my brain to start learning. And then I ended up with somebody's pure luck. The guy I had in mind in Hopkins was somebody called Terry Senowski. Senowski, Terry Sechenowski, but Terry Senowski. Terry was, again, himself a physics PhD from Princeton, and then switched to neurobiology during his postdoc in Harvard, and then was professor in 4 or 5 or 6 departments in Hopkins when I joined his lab. He was a big celebrity by then. He happens to my lineages. He did his PhD with John Hopfield and did postdoctoral research with Jeff Hinton. Hopfield and Hinton got the Nobel Prize last year in physics.
Okay.
And I knew both of them, right?
Okay.
So that was it. These people were pioneers in, I mean, they're hotshot physicists, but they're all now in neuroscience, right? And so
Terry, it was almost validation for your life
so
choices.
Terry said, this is fine, I don't know what I'm doing. You won't know what you're doing. Nobody knows what they're doing, but do something. Like, it'll be exciting. We'll figure it out. Right? ওই যে ফ্রিডমটা from a very regimented structural, এই নম্বর পেতে হবে, এই করতে হবে, নইলে আইআইটিতে ঢুকতে পারবে না, তার থেকে এই just sudden freedom. A lot of people cannot handle it also. I mean, it's a very high pressure in a different way. And so with Terry, I started my PhD. And then Terry decided he wanted to move out of Hopkins. And he was highly sought after at that time. And so academics move a lot in the US. So he finally decided to go to a place called Salk Institute, SALK, Salk Institute, in La Jolla, San Diego. And Salk was a place which was established by Jonas Salk, the polio vaccine guy.
Okay.
So Jonas was still alive at that time. And Francis Crick and Watson, DNA double helix. ওই ওয়াটসনের বইটা পড়েছিলাম. And Crick was chasing Terry to move to the Salk. So when we moved, Crick was the godfather of the lab.
Okay.
And I think somewhere deep down, বাঙালি জিন্স ছিল নিশ্চয়ই
ওদের মধ্যে.
হ্যাঁ, ওই ক্রিকের মধ্যে. কারণ ক্রিক বললো যে সব ঠিক আছে, কাজটা হবে, রোজ বিকেল 3:30 ল্যাবে চায়ের আড্ডা বসে. চা, not coffee. It was strictly forbidden, not that horrible American coffee, not allowed. চা, তার সঙ্গে বিস্কিটস, not cookies.
বিস্কুটের আড্ডা, এটা হচ্ছে তোমার
ক্রিকের ডিক্টার ব্রিটিশ. আর 3:30 সময়, because he will show up, everybody else had to show up. And he had a calendar printed out, সাইন আপ করতে হতো কে কবে চা দেবে. ওইটা সাইন আপ করলে ইউ ক্যান মিস ল্যাব মিটিং, বাট ইউ ক্যানট মিস টি, কারণ ক্রিক থাকবে. হ্যাঁ, সেইখানে চায়ের আড্ডা, খুবই ছোটো টেবিলে বসে আড্ডা হতো. দ্যাটস ওয়ার আই লার্ন মোস্ট অফ দ্য স্টাফ. আমি কোনো কোর্স ওয়ার্ক করিনি বাই দ্য টাইম অফ দ্য সলক, রাইট? দ্যাট ওয়াজ দ্য আড্ডা দ্যাট sort of
And
really
with a childhood hero, যার বইটা তুমি ওই তিওয়ারির পিছনে ছুটে ওই ইয়ের থেকে
and Crick was amazing. Crick was astonishing intellect. What I learned from those people was nothing stops you from doing science. It's not because of equipment or money, it's imagination. Kalpana shakti darkar. You have to be daring to imagine a possibility nobody else has dared. And Cricket সঙ্গে কথা বললাম, ফ্রান্সিসের সঙ্গে কথা বলে বুঝতে পারতাম যে why didn't I think of that? ও তো কোনো এক্সপেরিমেন্ট করতো না. Francis has never done an experiment in his life. He looked at other people's data and made sense out of it. Right? But brilliant mind. শুনে বুঝলাম যে this man is free to imagine. He's fearless. So it's really, you're held down by your capacity for imagination. The big questions. That's what I got there. And then, the Salk is located on the Pacific Ocean on a cliff. And you should look it up if you find a picture. It's one of the architectural marvels of modern America. The Salk Institute is located on the cliff. There's a midline, which is through which the two buildings on the side, and you can look straight into the ocean. So every evening after I finish my experiment, failure, success, doesn't matter. I stand there and I watch the Pacific Ocean sunset.
It was all worth it.
Absolutely worth it. Yes. So great setting, very unusual, because Salk did not give PhDs.
Okay.
So I had to get an arrangement with my Terry that I will go and work at the Salk, but still get my childhood dream of getting the PhD from
Johns Hopkins.
And he worked that out.
So that worked out. So তোমার এটা ডক্টরেট কোন সালে সে এটা
93 I got my degree.
আমার তখন 2 বছর বয়স.
I see. Thanks for rubbing it in.
Yeah.
Right.
Not an ageist, just মনে করিয়ে দিলাম একবার. But তারপরে তোমার MIT যাওয়া কিরকম করে?
Salk থেকে I went to Yale for a postdoc. Yeah.
মানে এমন নেম ড্রপ করছে একটার পর একটা ইউনিভার্সিটি, জাস্ট
বলবো না ABC করে বলবো।
হ্যাঁ কি বলবো, মানে তুমি এটা এরকম টুকটাক করে এদিকে Yale এদিকে Johns Hopkins.
Yale was interesting for a different reason. Yale, I started switching to the amygdala. I got interested in the amygdala. Amygdala is part of the brain which is located inside your temporal lobe on either side. Temples, right? So temple এর নিচে যেটা সেটা হচ্ছে temporal. So temporal lobe is right here.
To do with time.
টেম্পল মানে এই টেম্পল,
আচ্ছা,
মানে মন্দির টন্দির নয়, আজকাল আবার বলা যায় না কিছু। হ্যাঁ, তো টেম্পল, ওই দ্যাটস ওয়্যার দ্য amygdala is embedded, ঠিক আছে, and the amygdala deals with emotions. So I got interested in the amygdala because nobody was studying that, not being studied extensively, and I got interested in the fact that the same stress, now everybody will relate to this, you have stress, under chronic severe stress, your cognitive function is declining, you're forgetting things, unable to remember, right? Yet your emotions are very out of control, high. So if you think about it as a physicist, I see stress impinging on the brain. One symptom is going up, emotions, amygdala. The other symptom, ability to learn and remember, is going down. That's another structure next door called the hippocampus. So hippocampus and amygdala sit right next to each other. Hippocampus is like a cashew nut shaped structure. The amygdala is like an almond-shaped structure next to each other, and the temporal cortex, below the temporal cortex. So everybody knew why learning and memory was being impaired, because the hippocampus actually shrinks physically as a result of chronic stress. The neurons and their branches shrink. They lose synaptic contact, they lose the molecules that are important for forming memories. So everything goes downhill as a result of stress. But in the same brain, as a result of the same stress, the amygdala is going up.
But it expands.
Nobody knew that. Why is emotional function going up? So I found that. I showed for the first time that with the same stress in the same brain, the hippocampal neurons are shrinking, and the same class of neurons in the amygdala are growing bigger. And the bigger branches, more synapses, more molecules for learning and memory. So this contrast is what I picked up in my first study from Bangalore in 2001, 2002. And that opened up this whole new field of how stress has different effects in the amygdala compared to the hippocampus. And then I've been chasing that for 25 years.
Bhagwan, tumi juge juge doot pathaycho.
And then that, once you know what's changing, if you now want to curb the emotional symptoms, which are debilitating, high anxiety, high fear, you need to discover drugs. Now I have a system with these changes, I know what's changing. Put the drug in and see what blocks what. If you can block the cellular changes, then it might work with the whole organism. So that's how the science happens. You discover something and then always opens up an avenue for you to test drugs and go to the clinical direction as well.
তারপর এটা নিয়ে তোমার
কাজ করলাম ইয়েলে কিছুদিন ইয়েল I got started. I mean, the lab wasn't great. Things happen. But I loved Yale for another reason, because I have a very strong interest in politics and history. And Yale was damn good for that. তখন সেই বিল ক্লিন্টনের ক্যাম্পেইন চলছে সেকেন্ড টার্ম, মানে সেকেন্ড টার্মের জন্য, and lots of politicians came. I listened to Bishop Tutu, Jesse Jackson, আসছে সবাই টক দিচ্ছে. You can go to the law school and hang out and listen to anything you want. So that part of my cravings were satisfied in Yale. And then I decided I was going to come back to India.
এটা তুমি সবসময় জানতে যে you would come back to India?
Obsessed, right? It was partly personal. আমি বাবা মার একমাত্র সন্তান. And I could not get it out of my head যে একবার দেশে ফিরে চেষ্টা করা উচিত. And that must be the শান্তিনিকেতন নরেন্দ্রপুর effect. That deep down কোথায় একটা ছিল যে I was always homesick. I was working with these top guys, right? These Nobel laureates. মানে যে Nobel laureate নয়, মানে ক্রিক টিকের মতো লোক. ক্রিক ওয়াটসন একসঙ্গে এসে চা খাচ্ছে. হ্যাঁ, বাকি সবাই চুপ করে বসে আছে ভয়ের চোটে. মানে এদের সামনে কে মুখ খুলবে? জোনাস সল্ক, ক্রিক ওয়াটসন একসঙ্গে চা খাচ্ছে. This is the environment I was in, and I still felt home.
মানে এটা ইন্ডিয়াতে কাউকে বোঝানোর জন্য হচ্ছে শাহরুখ খান, আমির খান, সালমান খান একসাথে করে চা খাচ্ছে।
হলো না ঠিক।
তুমি এটা কম্প্যারিজনটা দাও এটা ইন্ডিয়ার পার্সপেক্টিভে।
মানে কি বলা যায়, নাসিরুদ্দিন, উত্তম কুমার, সৌমিত্র একসঙ্গে বসিয়ে দিলে, হ্যাঁ, তার তোমাদের জেনারেশনে সব হবে না।
আবার এখানে আমার এই দিস ইজ দ্য পে ব্যাক ফর দ্যাট এজেস্ট কমেন্ট আই হ্যাড মেড।
আমি কন্টিনিউয়াসলি রিভেঞ্জ নেব। আমি যা ডিলিট করে দিয়েছি তুমি, কিন্তু আমি বলে যাব
ডিলিট তো আগের সপ্তাহে আমরা করে দিয়েছি ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে, ওটা ডিলিট পেয়ে গেছে।
হ্যাঁ, ডিলিট পেয়ে গেছি। আমাকে জিজ্ঞেস করলো তুমি কি করছো, আমি আই এম গেটিং ডিলিটেড এই বললাম। অনেক বসে আছে, তাকিয়ে আছে আমার দিকে।
এই জন্যই বলেছিলাম যে যদি কোনো সায়েন্টিস্টকে আনতে হয় উই হ্যাভ টু হ্যাভ দ্যাট ব্যান্টার অলসো। দেখো, শুধু আমার তো শুনলে আমি তো এমনিও বেশি কিছু বুঝতে পারবো না।
তো বুঝিয়ে ছাড়বো আমি।
হ্যাঁ, তা সেটা তো বুঝতেই পারছি। হ্যাঁ,
তুমি ভেবে থাকো তুমি ছাড় পাবে না, দেয়ার ইজ এ কস্ট অ্যাটাচড টু দিস। তোমাকে নিউরোসায়েন্স শিখিয়ে আমি ছাড়বো।
আমি খুব এক্সাইটেড এই ব্যাপারটা। দেখো, আমি না জেনে বুঝে আমি ওর ক্লাসে মোটামুটি কিন্তু একটা সাইন আপ করে ফেলেছি, একটা কোঅপ করে নিয়েছি। আগে
চার্জ করছি না।
আগের সপ্তাহে অলরেডি গিয়ে আমাকে ল্যাবটা দেখিয়েছে। তো আমি অ্যাকচুয়ালি তুমি এমআইটির গল্পটা বলো, দেন উইল কাম ব্যাক টু
Calcutta. Then I went to Yale, and after that I applied to Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, TIFR Bombay, which is an elite institute in India, fantastic place. There, a visionary man called Obaid Siddiqui decided that he did not want to be in Bombay and want to start a new biology institute under TIFR, but in Bangalore. He was sort of looking to the future. So he was moving. I heard rumors. আমি তো বায়োলজিতে কাউকে চিনতাম না ভারতবর্ষে, আমি ফিজিক্স করে গেছিলাম. So I finally got hold of the man, and he came and met me in Yale and said, you should come and see our place. But there was no place at that time. There was a temporary place in Indian Institute of Science campus. গিয়ে কি একটা মনে হলো যে there is something here, maybe this will work. It was completely crazy. There was no building, no campus, nothing, and I decided I'll come. So I made the decision.
Because imagination, তুমি আগে শিখেছিলে যে if you can have the daring to imagine.
And these guys were fans. They had recruited some people who were very, very quite impressive. তো আমি ঠিক করলাম যে করবো, করে কিন্তু দেরি হচ্ছে, যা হয় আমাদের দেশে, কনস্ট্রাকশন হচ্ছে না, ক্যাম্পাসে হচ্ছে না। আবার 97 এসে দেখলাম তখনও মানে হাওয়া বায় শনশন, তারারা কাঁপে, কিছুই দেখা যাচ্ছে না কোথাও। হ্যাঁ, করে তখন আমি বলি যে আর সময় চলে যাচ্ছে। সো আই ডিসাইডেড আইল গো টু MIT অ্যাজ এ স্টপ গ্যাপ মেজার। আই হ্যাড অ্যান অফার। তো ওটা 1 বছরের জন্য গেছিলাম। ওরা বললো তুমি আমার হেরোদিনে বলে 1 বছর বলো না, তাহলে তোমাকে কেউ হায়ার করবে না, অ্যাটলিস্ট 2 বছর দাও। ওরা হরে ধরে 2 বছর হয়ে গেল। And then I just jumped and came from MIT.
How was MIT?
MIT was fantastic. MIT was truly fun. Because I had the freedom then to do what I want. I was planning for my move to India at a sort of semi-independent position in the Brain and Cognitive Science department. Worked with somebody called Mriganko Shur, who's
another Bengali,
head of the department eventually. But what happened in MIT was that towards the end of my stay, a professor called Susumu Tonegawa, a Nobel laureate, a Japanese Nobel laureate, Japanese origin Nobel laureate, who got his Nobel Prize in immunology. He basically explained how our immune system can deal with any range of infections that your body has never seen before, with a limited set of ingredients. Your body has some molecules devoted to this. And he showed how these little pieces are brought together,
like a jigsaw puzzle,
to counter any infection your body is essentially seeing for the first time. By definition, your body is not ready with the whole armory to deal with an infection. And infections change, as you saw in COVID, right?
And evolve.
Right.
Yeah.
So how the hell does that happen? This man single-handedly cracked that puzzle. আমাদের বিজনেসে, মেডিসিনে, ফিজিওলজিতে সোলো নোবেল প্রাইজ খুব কম হয়। একটা বিষয়ে এতজন ভালো কাজ করে, তার থেকে 3 জনকে বেঁচে হতে দেওয়া হলো, আর অনেকে পেল না। This man got it alone, right? At the age of 48, his discovery.
Which is also very young for a scientist.
His discovery was made in 37, age of 37. So Tonegawa discovered me and found out that I'm there. He needed some help with some technical stuff, and he sort of co-opted me, saying, "Why don't you stay? I কোথায় যাচ্ছ? ওখানে কিছু হবে না. Come here. What toys do you need? I'll give you everything." And আমি দেখলাম, I didn't know this man because he was in a different field. He moved to neuroscience after that from immunology. তো সবাই আমাকে ওয়ার্ন করলো যে এই বিরাট নাম, নোবেল লরেট, MIT-র হোমরাচরণা বদ্যি, একে না বললে কিন্তু খুশি হবে না। So you better be ready how to wiggle out of this. I had made up my mind that I'm coming back. So we got to know each other, and I said, look, I'm really not going to be able to do this. I'll go back to Bangalore, set up, then we can figure something out. Well, তাহলে তুমি ফিরে এসে আমার সঙ্গে collaborate করো. And he made me a very nice offer. But his offer was 6 months in MIT, 6 months in Bangalore, which was not feasible. I had to build my lab in Bangalore. So ওটাকে আস্তে আস্তে ঠেলে 4 মাস, তারপর 3 মাস করলাম। I would spend the summer there, work with his team. We produced some very nice work.
কি করছিল তোমরা ওখানে কাজ?
ওখানে he was very interested in learning in memory of the kind that is coded by the hippocampus. Memories of facts and events. He was not interested in the amygdala. Next door neighbor ওর কোনো interest ছিল না. So I said, fine, I'll do that with you, and I'll help your postdocs do it. But I should be able to use he was a master of genetically engineering mice. So he could knock out or mutate one molecule in that circuit and see what its effect is on memory. So making the link from molecule to memory, which you were asking, this man was a pioneer in that. Incredible. He just did it. And so it was great to have that man as a collaborator. So I could work on with him. But then I took those same mice, which are very precious, and started asking my own questions in the amygdala. So I had that freedom to build it up. And as my lab grew bigger, I stopped going. I would send my students. But it was a great time. MIT was fantastic. And Cambridge as a whole,
as a
এত
city,
দারুণ সুন্দর জায়গা, it's liberal, ঠান্ডা, কিন্তু ওই মানে হার্ভার্ড স্কোয়ারে বইয়ের দোকানগুলোতে মেকআপ করে দেয়। It's just and I made a lot of good friends like Abhijit. We became close. Abhijit Banerjee.
And আমাদের
good friend, ওরতে থাকতাম, অনেক সময় উঠতাম। So I had a good time.
ওখানে তো P labs নিয়ে কাজ না, poverty lab, JPAL. I think they're him and Esther.
জীবন আমার basic bonding to over music, classical music. Right. And of course, it doesn't hurt that he cooks so well.
সেটা নিয়ে তো একটা বইও লিখেছিল বুঝলে না? It was a very surprising read.
সাংঘাতিক ভালো রান্না করে। বরাবর আমার মনে আছে এখন যে রাত্রে ওবামা got elected, I had gone early to be there, and I spent the early evening with one of my professors, friends, Jill Lepore, American historian in Harvard. তো ওরা ওখানে প্রথম দিকে রেজাল্টগুলো দেখে তারপরে আমি সুইচড ওভার টু জিমা's হাউস, অ্যান্ড তোর জিমা একটা খুব ততক্ষণ আমার জেট লাগে পুরো কাহিল অবস্থা, মানে আর উঠে বসে থাকতে হচ্ছে না, হ্যাভেন্ট স্লেপ্ট ফর 2 nights. ওটা ছোটো টিভি এনে ঘরে লাগিয়ে দিয়ে ওইখানে বসে আমরা দেখলাম সেই ফেমাস স্পিচ ও আমার শিকাগোতে দেওয়া অ্যাকসেপ্টেন্স
প্রথম টার্ম.
Right. So MIT connection remained for many years after that. But as my work in Bangalore grew bigger, I sort of winded.
So this was which year that you finally made it back to Bangalore?
I made it in 98 July. Why do I remember July? আমার মেমোরি কিন্তু কাজ করে সবটা ইমোশনাল দিয়ে। জুলাইয়ের শুরুর দিকে ওয়ার্ল্ড কাপ ফাইনাল ছিল, মনে আছে? ফুটবল
আমি মনে থাকবে, আমার 7 বছর বয়স।
কি তুমি ফুটবল দেখতে না 7 বছর বয়সে?
7 বছর দেখতাম, কিন্তু জুলাইয়ে আমার ওয়ার্ল্ড কাপ ফাইনাল
ওগুলো মনে, আমি হ্যাড টু চেঞ্জ মাই ফ্লাইটস বিকজ অফ দ্য ফাইনাল ওয়াজ দ্য ডে আই ওয়াজ ফ্লাইং ফ্রম লন্ডন টু ব্যাঙ্গালোর, বম্বে। সো আমার মনে আছে, গোহারান হেরেছিল ব্রাজিল ফ্রান্সের কাছে। কমপ্লিটলি ট্রমাটিক মেমোরি, PTSD. সো দ্যাটস হাউ আই রিমেম্বার দ্যাট।
জিদানের গেমটা কি ওইটা, দ্য হেডবাট?
জিদান না, জিদানের গেমটা জিদান জিতলো সেবারে। রোনাল্ডো কুডন্ট প্লে বিকজ হি হ্যাড সিজার্স। মনে আছে, দেখেছো তো? করে I came back to Bangalore in July.
আমার মেমোরিটা একটু অ্যাসোসিয়েটিভ বেটার কাজ করে, আই থিঙ্ক। মানে ইমোশনস ক্যান বি ওয়ান অফ দেম, বাট আই অলওয়েজ
now it is bare bones for me. The only thing I remember is when there are football or cricket matches. That I do not forget. Appointment সব ভুলে যাই।
So coming back quickly to your time in Bangalore, biggest breakthrough and achievements during your time working back in India?
Yeah, I think I had a breakthrough very early on. I hesitate to use the word breakthrough. I think I got lucky. But I asked, I think, an interesting question, ওই যেটা বললাম যে একই স্ট্রেস hippocampusকে downhill push করছে, yet emotions going up. So something must be different in the amygdala, and I discovered that. I showed that the cells have bigger branches, more synaptic contacts,
Right.
and the molecules. So the whole framework I discovered of how stress acts differently. All one size does not fit all. The cortex and the hippocampus go downhill, thinking parts of the brain. The emotional part of the brain goes up. And then I understood all of it at each level, from behavior down to molecules.
তারপর এইটা ধরো করে ফেললে তুমি, তোমার একটা
This
ব্রেকথ্রু
took,
হয়ে গেল।
this took about, I would say, that work extended till for the next 15-20 years, from 1999.
এটা এই টাইমলাইন গুলো অদ্ভুত।
হ্যাঁ, it
মানে
takes
এটা
a lot
প্লিজ
of time.
এক্সপ্লেন টু আ নর্মাল পারসন, টু আ লেম্যান, যে তুমি ব্রেকথ্রু তো হয়েই গেল, তুমি এটা ফিগার আউট করেই ফেললে, তো তারপরে তুমি
Figuring out has a very high bar in science.
Okay.
One study by one person will not count.
তোমাকে ট্রায়ালস
You
করতে
have to
হবে।
build it up slowly, the whole story. So and you have to stay with it. You have to be persistent. You have to dig deep.
Okay.
Right? So you keep you find, if I have a finding,
Okay.
the cell got bigger. Okay. So what? What happens to the synapses? That's a different question, different technique. Then you figure out what have the synapses. Okay, the cell has more synapses and bigger branches. Great. So what? Does it affect memory? Does it affect behavior? Otherwise, what's the point? So then you go and do behavior. Then you say, why the hell does it go in the opposite direction? Are the molecules acting differently? Another set of questions. Then you can take the same question, turn it on its head. I took something from Tonegawa's lab. He had a way of genetically jacking up a molecule that's important for structure of neurons and memory formation. He had that mouse. I said, let me take that. So now you have more of that molecule that protects you against the effects of stress. What will that do? So now you're doing a genetic perturbation and looking at probing the same system. So it goes on and on and on.
So till what point? Like when
and
are you finally successful?
Well, it's a body of work. You can be a one-off overnight star, একটা গান টান গিয়ে নাচলে চলে গেলে হয়ে গেল, আর কিছু কেউ দেখলো না জীবনে, or you have a body of work, right? So this is a body of work sort of. It's a long race. It's a long game.
And the
It's a
body of
marathon,
work,
it's not a sprint.
It's a marathon, but তো এই ম্যারাথনটারও তো একটা এন্ড পয়েন্ট আছে। এইটার কি এন্ড পয়েন্ট আছে কোনো?
না, it's end point নেই। আমি 20 বছর কাজ করে, I'm considered an authority on how stress affects the amygdala.
You are.
I am.
At least সেইটা তো একটা সাকসেস বলা যেতে পারে।
And the recognition and all that. But you know what I'm fretting over right now? That's what scientists should be, I think. এত তফাৎ সব বার করে স্ট্রেস আর হিপোক্যাম্পাস amygdala সব বোর্ড বুঝলাম। কেন? Why is it still? The why doesn't go away in science. Why is it so that একই স্ট্রেসে কোথায় গিয়ে তফাৎটা হচ্ছে? মলিকুল বুঝে গেলাম, সব বুঝে, কেন?
The what has been answered,
but there are layers of what and how.
Okay.
Right? So if you really, the good science is always you find another layer and some surprises come. So right now, I'll frame the question for you and you'll understand it hopefully. Stress হলে কি হয়? প্রথম জিনিসটা স্ট্রেস হরমোন শুট আপ করে যায়। হিউম্যানসের ক্ষেত্রে কর্টিজল, অ্যানিমালসের ক্ষেত্রে কর্টিকোস্টেরন, রাফলি সেম থিং। তো সেটা পুরো শরীরে, ব্রেনে সব জায়গায় উঠে যাচ্ছে কয়েক সেকেন্ডের মধ্যে।
এটা পয়জনের মধ্যে নাকি?
It's just a natural response. Stress hormones will go up, adrenaline will go up. Why do you need adrenaline? It gives you the energy. Performance stress. এই বসে কথা বলছি।
এই ফাইট অর ফ্লাইটেও কি সেই
এইটা absolutely
এটাই হয়? কারণ দুটোই
everything
two
goes
sides
up.
of the same coin.
So actually the brain, these two areas are seeing the same hormonal surge. It's not different. Why is it different after that? কোথায় বদলটা হচ্ছে? So now I have a layer of new ideas that ওই যে স্ট্রেস হরমোনটা উঠছে, তার ফলে একটা, there's a neurotransmitter, a brain signaling molecule called glutamate. Glutamate is used for signaling between neurons, for chemical signaling. That glutamate also surges up everywhere in the brain. তার মানে স্ট্রেস হরমোন আর গ্লুটামেট লেভেলে কোনো তফাৎ নেই কিন্তু দুটো এরিয়ার মধ্যে। তফাৎ কোথায় হচ্ছে? যেই মুহূর্তে আমি তারপর সিনাপসের ভেতরে যাচ্ছি, তফাৎ হয়ে যাচ্ছে। তাহলে ওইখানে কোথাও একটা তফাৎ হচ্ছে যেটা আমি এখনও ধরতে পারিনি। You know what I think it is? This is my new hypothesis. যে ওই যখন আগুন লাগে, you have first responders, firefighters coming. In the brain যখন আগুনটা লাগছে, stress hormones are up, glutamate is up. If you have too much glutamate for too long, toxic. It will cause you damage in your brain. So you better clear it up fast. Who clears it up fast? Something called glia. This another class of brain cells which are called astrocytes. As the name suggests, astrocyte, they look like stars, right? So these star-like cells are wrapped around the neurons and they are almost 50% of the brain. But they are ignored. They have not been studied extensively. People only focus on the neuron, the big guy in the room. আমার ধারণা যে astrocyte গুলো, they are actually known to mop up the extra stuff that's coming out. like the glutamate.
They're the cleaners of the brain.
They just suck it up, they vacuum it up. তখন আমার মনে হচ্ছে that vacuum cleaner in the amygdala versus the hippocampus is different. So the ability to mop up the extra glutamate is fundamentally different between those two areas. As a result, one is going up and one is going down. That's my new question.
আর এটা এই 20 বছর রিসার্চের পরেও এখনো এটা তোমার
না, এটা আমার মাথায় এখন ঢুকলো যে I need to chase it. So I could hang up my boots, আরে হয়ে গেছে, ঠিক আছে, সেরা বাঙালি পেয়ে গেছি, ব্যাস।
তুমি 2012-তে সায়েন্সের জন্য সেরা বাঙালি
রিটায়ার করে গেলাম, খুশিতে আছি।
আর ওরা তো আর সেকেন্ড টাইমও সেরা বাঙালি দেবে না,
দেবে না, বলে আমি বেশি পরিশ্রম করে কি লাভ আছে,
কি আছে আর পরিশ্রম করে সেরা বাঙালি পাওয়াটাই তো একটা মানুষের জন্য সবথেকে বড় সম্মান।
বলে আমি দেখলাম যে I still don't know. So I was having a conversation with my guru Bruce McEwen in Rockefeller, and I said, Bruce, it's very nice that I've discovered all these differences. I am known for this work. I'm still bugged by the fact that deep down you and I still don't know. Cano.
And also it's funny because if you don't actually pursue it and see it till the end, for somebody new coming into that field and to understand, মানে to get context on the kind of work that you've done, এটা তো অনেক সময় লাগবে। তুমি তো 20 বছর বাদে এই জিনিসটা ফিগার আউট করেছো।
So Bruce and I came to the conclusion in New York, I remember. Bruce said, Shona, just look at what's same. Wise man, he's the father figure of the field. Well, what's same? I said, this is the same. I said, then what is going on? I said, then it must be the astrocytes. So I said, do you know anybody? I've never read a single paper in astrocytes. I know nothing about astrocytes. So I asked Bruce, do you know somebody who's an expert in astrocytes? So he connected me to a few. So I asked them, তোমরা কি জানো যে astrocyte is different between amygdala and hippocampus? Simple question. কেউ উত্তর দিতে পারলো না. Nobody had the answer. The world's leading 5 guys I asked all over the world, all of them drew a blank. Are that's it then. This is why I go after next. Identify something, a gap in knowledge, go after it.
তোমার কি মনে হয় এখন with AI being a bigger part of all our lives, of course including the world of research, do you think এই তোমার যে কাজটা আগের বার 20 বছর করতে লেগেছিল এটা তুমি 2 বছরে করতে পারবে using?
See, AI right now, with all due respect, and AI এর father figure বলে জেফ হিন্টনের নাম দেখবে খবর কাগজে সব জায়গায়, তাই তো? জেফ was my PhD advisors, close collaborator. যে পেপারগুলোর জন্য নোবেল প্রাইজটা পেলো তার co-author হচ্ছে আমার PhD advisor, right? So I know the field. It has enormous impact, huge potential. But it is being used as a tool to largely mimic what we can do much faster on a larger scale. And it can get information and glean information from a huge loads of data. That's the power. যেটা আমাদের নিজেদের করতে গেলে অনেক বেশি সময় লাগবে. It will not think for you.
But এটা তো কারণ তো ডেটাটাই তো নেই। তুমি বলছো এটা তো it can collect from a whole bunch of data.
But আমি সেইটা হয়তো আমাকে 2-3 বছর ধরে পড়ে ভাবতে হতো, সেটা হয়তো আমার কারণে সামারাইজ করে দিয়ে দিল কয়েক মিনিটে। But I have to tell AI what I am looking for and why. They are incapable of doing that thing.
তুমি কি ক্লিনিক্যাল ট্রায়ালস বা
ড্রাগ ডিজাইনে অ্যাবসলিউটলি AI এর ইম্প্যাক্ট ম্যাসিভ হবে, হচ্ছে, অলরেডি হচ্ছে, ঠিক আছে? I am not in that part of the game. I think the fundamental imagination and creativity in thinking about a question, I think humans will still have to do it, and then AI will do what you want it to do to the extent that the information is available. So that way I think AI is fine. We'll see what it does. In some parts of neuroscience, AI is helping a lot. So animal behavior study করা, তুমি ভিডিও করলে 3-4টে অ্যানিমাল বিহেভ করছে, সোশ্যাল ইন্টারাকশন, এই যে ছেলেটি কথা টক দিচ্ছিল ওর কাজে দেখছিলাম। Now you can sit there, videotape, and have few guys sit there with a stopwatch and এখন এই করছে এইভাবে আগে করা হতো। এখন you have an AI algorithm which will look at the video and score it for you real fast and pull out many more features than we wouldn't see with our own eyes. So there I can see the power of AI in managing, accessing data, analyzing data of a certain kind, provided you tell AI what's correct and what's not. Well, it will give you garbage in, garbage out. So I think we will have to get used to, I think the younger people will have to get used to they are much faster at adapting and using AI than my son is a lot better at this than I am. But
আমরা তো ডিজিটাল নেটিভ না, আমরা তো বড় হয়েছি যে টেকনোলজি নিয়ে, so the way we handle it is going to be of course different.
Things change very rapidly. So I think neuroscience is see, AI is a product of neuroscience, by the way.
আচ্ছা,
of course, right,
artificial intelligence.
You have to have intelligence first.
So break it down. তুমি ধরো তুমি তোমার 95 বছরের ঠাকুমাকে এই ব্যাপারটা বোঝাচ্ছ যে আর্টিফিশিয়াল ইন্টেলিজেন্স কি হয় from the perspective of a neuroscientist.
Right.
And answer this question যে how did neuroscience result in the creation of AI? এইটা তুমি একটুখানি বোঝাও তো, আমি তোমার 95 বছরের ঠাকুমা।
Very, very good question. So if you look at original neural networks from which now AI has happened.
নিউরাল নেটওয়ার্কটা বাজওয়ার্ড আমি বুঝি না।
আচ্ছা, neural networks মানে you have little units, mathematical units, very ball and stick model. They are connected, which is একটা unit তার সঙ্গে আরেকটা unit কাটা হচ্ছে, one neuron connected to another one. That neuron-like entity is a mathematical entity, is a very primitive form. একটা ইনপুট এলো, একটা আউটপুট দিল, একটা ছোট গ্রাফ। কানেকশনটা খুব রুডিমেন্টারি, 0 to 1 এর মধ্যে একটা ভ্যালু যাবে। এরকম তুমি যখন টেরি শুরু করেছিল, 3টে লেয়ার, একটা আউটপুট লেয়ার, একটা ইনপুট লেয়ার, মাঝখানে একটা হিডেন লেয়ার, এই কয়েকশো হয়তো ইউনিট কানেক্টেড হলো। And they are mimicking, they're a very poor man's approximation of the total richness and capacity of a neuron, nowhere near it, not even 1%. তাতেই তখন already he could convert text to speech. সেইটাকে তুমি যদি if you go into billions and billions of units with massive hardwire like what you get from NVIDIA, চিপের মধ্যে বিল্ড ইন করে দিচ্ছ, you're not doing a computer simulation anymore, you have hardware to do it, and you scale it up with massive power supply, and now you crunch up all the data that's available and put it in, it does something.
So it's better than a poor man's approximations. And
but the units, that the mathematical units which are neuron-like and the connections between them are very primitive. They do not capture even the minutest richness of a neuron. So imagine that a neuron will still do it better than that single unit. এখানে ফায়ার পাওয়ার, মানে গায়ের জোরে একটা ম্যাসিভ প্রগ্রেস হয়েছে। Here's the downside, সব সায়েন্সে এটা হয় টেকনোলজিতে। If you now ask the best AI people, explain how it came up with this result, they cannot, most often. Explainability is a huge problem. So decisions are being made on people's life. কে লোন পাবে, কে সিকিউরিটি ক্লিয়ারেন্স পাবে, হ্যাঁ, এই যে সব ডিসিশন আছে আমেরিকাতে, ফাইন্যান্সিয়াল ডিসিশন হ্যাজ বিং মেড অন ইউর লাইফ, is based on the data and the quality of data that's being fed in. সেখানে যদি already racial bias থাকে, then the output will also have that.
বেশিরভাগ সময় তো সাদা লোকজন এই
so explainability then is not there. Why did it come up with the rejection when I'm perfectly fine? Nobody knows, right?
Because the bias might have come from the engineer themselves,
or
right?
what has been entered as data. They are not
ডেটাটা তো
collected
কবেকার পুরনো ডেটা, হয়তো সেইগুলো নিয়ে ফিড করছে।
So this is, all new technology, even in biomedicine, has downsides, and we are not. I mean, it started with the atomic bomb, right? There are ethical issues that come up. Are we ready to grapple with it? My personal fear, is that we are not, because it's being driven not by governments anymore, by private companies. That is a big, because they don't report to anybody. They are not being voted in or out. So they are on their own trip, and regulation is very lax in the US, hardly non-existent right now, right? So that is my worry, is that quite often the high of I do it because I can, that's the arrogance of a scientist or a technologist, and you do it without thinking about the consequences on society. And who's going to call the shots? We are not calling the shots right now. Not even governments are calling the shots. Government people are even unable to understand the depth of the problem right now.
তার মানে একটা নতুন ক্লাস হয়তো তৈরি হতে চলেছে, an oligarchy of sorts of people who have the Metas and the Nvidias of the world, who would potentially run the world because their amount of power that they have.
সেই মনে হয় যে তোমাদের সময় ছিল কিনা জানি না, আমাদের সময় ছিল সেই রচনার বই পাওয়া যেত না, মুখস্থ করতে সবাই রচনা বিচিন্তা টাইপের একটা বই হতো, সেখানে বিজ্ঞান আশীর্বাদ না অভিশাপ, এটা একটা প্রবন্ধ থাকতো সবসময়। হ্যাঁ, অনেকে ওটা দুলে দুলে মুখস্থ করতো, ইন দ্য হোপ যে ওটা আসবে কখনো। তো দ্যাট থিং hasn't gone away actually. বিজ্ঞান আশীর্বাদ না অভিশাপ, it depends on who's using it and how, right? There will be rogue enterprises that want to use it for the bad reasons. Who's policing them?
And keep feeding the bare minimum, lowest common denominator of stuff to normal people. They are happy, they are distracted.
And then once you grow dependent on such technology, your innate capacities decline.
তাই তো হচ্ছে, সব মানুষই সারাক্ষণ ধরে আর কিছু।
ক্যালকুলেটর যখন চালু হয়েছিল আমাদের স্কুলে মনে আছে, আমেরিকায় ক্যালকুলেটর পেয়ে গেল সবাই, 2 2 4 করতে পারছে না। আমরা যাচ্ছি গিয়ে ওখানে 5 12 60 বলে দিচ্ছি, বলছে আরে জিনিয়াস। হ্যাঁ, মানে ওইটা ইটস ডিপেন্ডস, ইটস এ double-edged sword, right?
Okay, now coming back to your work in Calcutta and why Shonada features on today's episode of the podcast. তো আমি একটু আগে বলছিলাম যে খুব রেয়ারলি হয় কলকাতা শহরে এমন কিছু লোকজনের কাজ দেখে বা এমন কিছু জিনিস দেখে আই গেট কমপ্লিটলি মাইন্ড ব্লোন। আর তুমি তো মাইন্ড নিয়েই কাজ করো, তো অবশ্যই তোমার জিনিসটা দেখে মাইন্ড ব্লোন হলাম। তো আমাদের ঠিক পাশের বাড়িতেই টিসিজি ক্রেস্ট নামক একটা সংস্থান আছেন পূর্ণেন্দু চ্যাটার্জি তৈরি করা, হুজ ডান সাম ইনক্রেডিবল ওয়ার্ক, হলদিয়া পেট্রোকেমিক্যালস ওয়ান অফ হিজ অর্গানাইজেশনস। তাদের বাড়িতেই টেকনো ইন্ডিয়ার পাশে সোনাদার ল্যাব, and his lab spans about 35,000 square feet. Its lab is called Chinta, where সেইটা দেখেই আমার সকল চিন্তা মুক্ত হয়ে গেল যে আমাদের কলকাতার সায়েন্টিফিক প্রাওয়েস অ্যান্ড ফিউচার সিমস ব্রাইট। কারণ এরকম একটা ল্যাব আমি আমার জীবনে কোনো দিন দেখিনি, এমন সব যন্ত্রপাতি সেগুলোও সেরকম কোনো দিন দেখিনি, যেমন লোকজন ওখানে কাজ করে সেরকমও আমার দেখা খুব একটা বেশি নয়। অ্যান্ড আই ফিগার্ড দ্যাট দিস ইজ পারহ্যাপস ওয়ান অফ দ্য মোস্ট ইউনিক ল্যাবস কারেন্টলি, not only in our city but probably in the world right now, যেখানে তুমি পেট্রি ডিশে মানুষের মানে চলন্ত ফেরন্ত মানুষের ব্রেনস তুমি তৈরি করছো। এবং সেখানে তোমার আরও বেশি উত্তর কী হচ্ছে জানি না, কিন্তু লাস্ট 2 বছর তুমি যেখানে যে কাজ করছো সেখানে তোমার অনেক রকম নতুন প্রশ্ন বেরিয়েছে। তো সেই আমাদের সাথে একটু তুমি শেয়ার করো যে তোমার এই প্রশ্নগুলো কী এবং কী করতে পারি আমরা as this podcast, let's say, to take the good work that you're doing out into the world so that we can get more support for the work that you do. কারণ কলকাতা শহরে এরকম একটা যে কাজ হচ্ছে এটাই অভাবনীয়। So let's get into the brass tacks of Chinta and what you're doing there.
So Chinta was sort of came out of multiple rounds of conversations with Purnenduda, very ambitious and generous man who supported me in building this new center. And the focus was যে আমি এতক্ষণ ধরে বেসিক নিউরোসায়েন্সের ফাইন্ডিং এর কথা বলছিলাম না, ডিসকভারি নিউরোসায়েন্স।
এগুলো বেসিক যদি হয় তাহলে
মানে ডিসকভারি doesn't have translation of into applications in mind explicitly, but it has to be translated into applications at some point. And Purnenduda was saying that maybe this is a time for Ishwana to pivot to see how we can take these discoveries into delivery of one. So that's the word translation. So this Chinta is a translational neuroscience institute. আমি ব্যাঙ্গালোরের কাজ ফিরে এখানে ছেড়ে এখানে এলাম থিঙ্কিং যে এবারে আমি যা কাজ করবো ইট উইল বি মোর ডিজিজ ফোকাসড, মোর পেশেন্ট ফোকাসড, বাট উইথ এ বিগ ডিফারেন্স, which is that we have to focus on how the disorder, the brain diseases, affect the Indian population. And why is that? The reasons are very sort of intuitive.
biased জন্য নয়,
intuitive. Brain disorders এখন are a major health threat to India because we are living longer, right? Every family now has elderly members who are in their 80s, sometimes in their 90s, which is great. People are living longer. But that brings in age-related disorders, brain disorders like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other dementia. Yet, when we have to deal with it, brain medicines are generally not very effective still. Despite neuroscience discoveries being fantastic, the translation to actual medicines, new medicines, is lag behind. That's because just studying the brain is difficult and making drugs work in the brain is difficult, unlike cancer or other heart diseases where you have many new medicines. Why? Because the access to the brain is complicated.
মানে মাথা কাটতে হবে brain
you cannot do that. Plus, the drugs have side effects. Now, cancer is side effect, people take it. If you can extend life by 6 to 9 months, most people say, sure, I'll take that side effect. Brain is side effect when you're a different person. Think about it. You are no longer the person you're trying to help. So the bar is extremely high. The tolerance for any side effects are very, very
কি রকম side effect হতে পারে?
I mean, you can become groggy and you're no longer the person you are. Maybe your cancer is being countered, but you're no longer there as a human being, right? So it's a very different ballgame, very challenging. And so there are complexities of the brain, which I think, and then this bar is very high. As a result of which, many drug trials in the West fail, most often fail, even if they're not toxic or anything, they fail.
Because acceptability is low.
But also there's a reason for it. All the drug discovery happens in animal models, rats and mice and flies and things like that. So we find something, a drug works in the, quote-unquote, works in the animal model. We're all excited. Kagoji chhobi tui berolo, lekha teka berolo, shobai khushi. Trial e gelo, most of the time it's sort of blah. Either fails or doesn't do much. Repeatedly এটা হচ্ছে,
আর অনেক সময়ও তো লাগে না?
সময় লাগে, 10 বছর 12 বছর লাগছে, hugely expensive, lots of regulatory hoops you have to jump through, FDA, and at the end of it most drug companies will say we're not going to take that kind of risk, we cannot sustain that kind of risk. So they're pulling out, they have pulled out. এই অবস্থায় এটা হচ্ছে ওয়েস্টে। What are the chances in India? Who's going to think about the Indian patients, right? Nobody's going to think about it. That's number one. Number two, even if a drug works in a Caucasian population in the West, we are genetically very different, South Asians, right? Our genetics is different, our metabolism is different, our immune system is different, our food habits are different, our social context is different, physiology is different. We're different kind of people. What are the chances, even if the drug works in a Caucasian population, it will work in this genetics and this physiology? Low. We don't know that. We don't really know the answer to that, right? So if we have to discover drugs in India for Indian populations at scale, we have to do the basic research of that disorder, how it takes shape in the Indian brain, right? And we're nowhere near doing that. Why not? There's a structural barrier. We have fantastic doctors, smartest guys around, extremely hardworking. We have fantastic engineers and scientists, also fantastic top order. They never meet. They never work together. একজন হাসপাতালে বসে আছে, হাই স্কুল পাস করে মেডিকেল স্কুলে ঢুকে গেল, মিড গ্রাইন্ডার. Even if they want to do research, they're really smart. I know many of them. They're never given a chance to do anything. হাসপাতাল ঢুকে যাওয়ার পরে রাত 9টায় তুমি পেশেন্ট দেখো, right? When are you going to do the research? And even if you're given the time to do research, you have never been trained in research.
যেটা আমেরিকায় হয়,
MD PhDs.
MD PhD,
right?
Exactly.
So you can see the structural barriers are hardwired, right? How you can't break that. That's an established education system. You're with basic science, high science, TIFR, ISC, IIT করলে আমি হাসপাতালে গিয়ে কি করবো? সময় নষ্ট, আমি আমার কাজ করছি. And further, you can see. So we have a structural
There's a disconnect between these
serious.
two
So
classes of people.
we are not going to change those guys, their established places. They have good reason to do what they do. So we have to create a new paradigm, and that's what Chinta is. So rather than having people pulled in, take the disease as the centerpiece. Then build a team around it. So you're signing up to do this with the best technology and skills you have, right?
Wow.
But what do you pick? You have to set up an example, right? Examples are very important at the beginning. It makes or breaks a project. So when I came here, I told myself, I will not do what I did in Bangalore or MIT or anywhere else. I will not work on stress. I will not work on autism. Make a sacrifice. Make a change. Because if I keep doing the same thing, everybody else will follow, right? So I have to set an example. So I go and meet Dr. Rishikesh Kumar, who was also on the dais with us that day.
Another leading neuroscientist.
Right, neurologist. Fantastic neurologist, trained.
And one of your best friends.
Best friends, and trained abroad and came back, and he works in INK, Institute of Neuroscience, Kolkata. And I'd known him for a few years.
Which is also another institution which is doing very well.
Very
because
well.
we're talking about Calcutta and Dr. Robin Sengupta.
Visionary man.
Visionary man.
Absolutely.
মানে 30 বছর আগে UK থেকে ফিরে এসে ক্রাউড ফান্ডিং করে একটা নিউরোসায়েন্সেস সেন্টার তৈরি করে নিয়েছে, which is seen as a global destination for neurosciences.
For the entire East and Northeast, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Right?
সেখানে এখন ইউনিভার্সিটিও তৈরি হচ্ছে INK এর.
So Robin Sengupta is just a missionary zeal. And then he introduced me to Rishikesh. And so when Rishi and I started talking, he said, well, I'll get you Fragile X patients, because I was known for
autism.
I said, no, what is it that bothers you? What's your challenge? Well, you may not have heard about it. SCA12. I said, I've never heard of it. What is it? Well, spinocerebellar ataxia, meaning movement disorder, because the spine and the cerebellum, back of the brain, there's an area devoted to movement, is damaged because of genetic reasons. So there's a gene called spinocerebellar ataxia type 12 gene, SCA12. That gene causes this damage. And these patients are uniquely Indian. What do I mean by that? They affect certain segments of the Marwari population, people from Rajasthan. I said, wow, this I did not know.
This came to you from Dr. Sengupta?
Right. Rishikesh, and papers they had published that there's a genetic cause for this. So that's good, because you know the genetic cause, right? You have a genetic underpinning, you know the symptoms. So remember my ladder structure, behavior to genes. You had the genes, you had the behavior, movement. Now you figure out the middle. That's where I come in.
স্ট্যান্ড আপ কমিকের মতো একটা এক্সপ্লেন করলে তুমি এইটাকে, রিকল ছিল, তারপরে তুমি এটা জোকটাকে, প্রেমিসটাকে এক্সপ্লেন করলে। গ্রেট, ওকে।
তা হয়ে গেল। তো আমি বললাম, Rishikesh, this is good. I will have to reprogram my brain now, because I've never heard of this before. So you educate me, and I will start thinking how we can create a model that can be studied. So with his help, generous help, he assigned people in his team who would work with us. We got access to some of his patients, confirmed SCA12 patients who keep coming back to him. And they very kindly agreed to donate a little bit of their blood. I just need a little tiny vial of their blood, from which I can create stem cells, induced pluripotent stem cells, iPSCs, from which you can reprogram them to anything in the body. So you can now take those cells and make them into brain cells.
এটা ওইখানটা ওই পোকেমন ছিল একটা ডিটো বলে ওটার মতো
By the way, Pokemon is a good analogy because one of the men who pioneered this work in creating these stem cells is a Japanese guy called Professor Yamanaka.
Okay.
And Yamanaka got the Nobel Prize for this technology along with somebody else. So I started developing that technology here in India.
In Kolkata, not in India.
First Bangalore,
then
Kolkata. But I'd never done it in neurodegeneration like SCA12. So I told Rishikesh, I will try this. Let's see what happens. So we got a couple of families, unaffected
all
siblings.
Marwari families.
Well, these particularly SCA12. And one of them are unaffected sibling and their affected sibling from the same family. So I have some similarity. And then
AB test করছিল ওটা AB test করার জন্য মানে
no, just take the blood to create the stem cells. This is a protocol we had created earlier.
তাহলে কেন unaffected sibling এর
I want to control disease free.
Okay.
You have to compare it to something,
right.
We know nothing about what goes wrong in the cells. So this is like a blank slate. So my colleagues in Bangalore who had moved with me, two of them, Bharat Reddy and Rakhi Pal, they helped start the whole thing here. And with Rishikesh's help, we started generating these stem cells. And then we created brain cells, cortical neurons, and then astrocytes, and then 3D brain tissue. They are now growing in a dish of people who are hopefully roaming around somewhere in Kolkata. I haven't seen them. It's all anonymous. But they're 3D brain tissue, or they're called brain organoids. They're not brain. They're little.
They don't look like brains either.
No, it's a few millimeters big, and then you grow them in a dish, and now you have a disease-free brain tissue and the SCA12 brain tissue growing together. And now I have to use all my cool neuroscience techniques to go and record from these neurons their electrical signal, their calcium signal, their biochemical differences, to see what is off between the healthy and the diseased cell.
So just to again break it down, we have to keep taking breaks because all of this is very dense scientific information, and even though you're an amazing storyteller, sometimes it's hard to truly process what it is that you're doing because it is complicated, right? So I'm trying to learn everything that you have in 30 years of your professional activity in 30 minutes. So
right, you're doing very well, I must say.
My brain is hang kore jacche ekটুখানি. So just to understand, if you had not done the work that you do here in Chinta,
yes,
what would the impact of this be on the people that you are doing the comparison?
So first of all, Rishikesh is the first one to tell me this, that they are treating the disease as it manifests in terms of symptoms. They have to help them in their daily lives. So if you're falling down, you have tremor, all of this, you take existing medicines which are not meant for SCA12, maybe they're meant for Parkinson's, which is a different disorder, different genetic basis, and just do a cocktail of drugs and prescriptions to manage their disease on a day-to-day basis. We are not going at the root cause of the disorder. We know it's a gene, but then what? What goes wrong? So that science has to be done to understand in SCA12 what is off, how is it different, which brain cells are affected, and how. So we are doing that. We now know that the cortical cells from the cortical tissue that we are creating in a dish, these neurons are unable to fire their full complement of electrical signals. They normally would fire in a certain way. They are unable to fire that. That's a pretty profound effect. Right? The electrical signals are not being generated. The calcium signals inside the cell are not being generated.
And that directly affects a certain kind of Marwari people in Calcutta.
That affects their brain cells in an area, cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain. So immediately this discovery tells me that there must be something off in their cognitive processing, not just movement. People are focused on the movement. So I went and asked Rishikesh, don't you think could there be something off in the cognition? He said, I always thought so. But we don't have the time to go into it because people are falling down, their balance is off. I have to deal with the emergency. So I said, well, we should check that then. So immediately a finding leads to another question. So he then helped us get access to these patients in a setting, peaceful home setting, where we go and we really assess their cognitive abilities. And we're beginning to see deficits there. So decisions they make, things they remember on a daily life is being affected. How are we helping? You are now building up a body of science, and you know exactly what signals are off in the cell. Every time you find something like that, what's the advantage? You know you have a target now. it's a druggable target. I know exactly the underlying molecular mechanism of why that cell is unable to fire.
So you can actually now deal with it.
Yes, I can look for existing compounds, make new compounds, repurpose existing drugs to see can it fix it. If it fixes it, I need to then see will it fix movement problems and so on. So it starts the science and brings it back to new medicines, right? And if we don't do this for our population, nobody else is going to do it, right?
Because it's not of any importance to somebody sitting in Florida or in Germany or somewhere in Philippines.
So you're creating a drug discovery platform, you're doing basic science, and you're doing something very important socially. Guess what? For the first time in this city, fantastic Dr. Salk Rishikesh Kumar and his colleagues are working with basic neuroscientists in the same city under the same roof. We have bridged that gap. I was talking about the yawning gap between clinical and basic neuroscience. If you don't bring them together, nothing's going to happen. You cannot just bring them together to have a drink and samosas. You have to bring them around a science that matters to them and the patients. We have created that model.
And the final beneficiaries of this are going to be Marwaris in Calcutta.
Right. Or anywhere in the country.
Right. Who are...
so we just are lucky in the sense that there's a community that has lived here for a long time, but they exist in Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, everywhere.
But they don't know it yet.
No, they don't.
So through this podcast, hopefully
these
they will know.
These patients exist in Bangalore. They have been studied by Nimhans in Bangalore.
Right.
But
we are
we are working with them now. We're going to talk to them. I've worked with them. But the basic is that we're creating a paradigm for partnership, where the best minds are coming in to take on a challenge of a medical problem that affects particular individuals in this country for the first time. That shows you a path to create our own framework.
So collaboration in science, I guess.
And bring the high science, the high-end science to clinical applications.
Ar kono din hoyni.
And it has to be that done urgently, right? So ami movement shuru korechi. What's my next step? I'll go to Parkinson's with the numbers at 10x, 100x more.
Because this is still SCA12 is still
it's
very
limited number. Yeah. But it gives me a way of. But you have to compete also, right? This intense competition. The best minds in the world are working in neuroscience now. From computer science to biology, they're all in there.
And some places pay more because if it's related to AI, suddenly you have people getting $100 million.
They're putting up Chan Zuckerberg. They're all putting in money. They're all putting in money into this, right? Why are they doing that? They're investing in the future. We don't have that yet. We have to build that capability. So now, if I can take same paradigm, same team, can just pivot now from one movement disorder to the next. Parkinson's, that 10x, 100x more, right? But I have a whole framework ready now, right? And I can keep expanding. Same thing with autism. I used to work in autism. I like to go back to autism, right? So the main thing is actually partly cultural, to give hope to younger people that you can do this in this city. Kolkata boshe eta kora shambhav. So the scientists who are working on it are focused on the science. The clinicians are focused on their patients. I have one step behind them. I also have to think about the bigger picture implications of this.
Society.
Nobody gives us half a chance in Kolkata of doing this, right? Why did Shona leave Bangalore? He's lost it, right? So if we can do this here and show that, look, we have done it. It is possible in Kolkata, in this city, to bring people together and solve an intractable problem for the first time in the world. The competitive advantage we have, Kolkata has more SA12 patients than the rest of the world combined.
Unique problem, unique solution sitting in Calcutta.
Even if a hotshot guy somewhere in Europe and America wants to study this, I have many more patients than he or she does.
Yeah. It's a natural advantage.
Right? You've got to come and work here with us, right? So that's also important. You want to have a competitive advantage because otherwise you get scooped.
Yeah.
Science is moving at a very fast pace. So there are all these issues that are in my head. That's why I don't sleep very much.
And that's giving more stress to you, and then তাই না তোমার ওই
ঘুমোচ্ছে না অ্যামিগডালা পুরো শুট করে বেরিয়ে যাচ্ছে আর ম্যানচেস্টার সারাক্ষণ হাঁটছে ওতে আরো আমার স্ট্রেসটা বেড়ে যাচ্ছে এই দ্যাটস ইট
আমার একটা শেষ প্রশ্ন আছে তোমার জন্য বিকজ আই হ্যাভ রিচড I think this was as challenging a podcast to host as was my class 12 math exam.
আচ্ছা
হ্যাঁ দুটোই খুব কঠিন ছিল.
So these are both were lodged in your amygdala basically.
ওটার থেকে আমার PTSD এখনো আছে.
Emotional memory আর
হ্যাঁ এই এপিসোডটা থেকে আমার PTSD
আমার ওটা কেমিস্ট্রিতে ছিল তোমার
কেমিস্ট্রি
সংস্কৃত irrespective of the full marks আমি 2-3 বেশি পেতাম না.
আমি তো কোনোদিন সংস্কৃত পড়িনি তো আমার এটা নেই. বাট বাট আমার একটা শেষ প্রশ্ন আছে আজকে তোমার জন্য, বিফোর মাই ব্রেন কমপ্লিটলি ফ্র্যাগমেন্টস অ্যান্ড বিকামস লাইক ওই ডিমটা হয় না সকালবেলা তুমি যেটা ওই যে
that's a very disturbing analogy. Let's just keep it away.
লেটস কিপ ইট, আমার ব্রেনটা ওইদিকে যাচ্ছে খুব ফ্র্যাগমেন্টেশনের
I
দিকে।
sincerely hope that doesn't happen. Yes.
লেটস কিপ ইট দ্যাট ওয়ে। আর তোমার আবার উইল কন্টিনিউ অন মাল্টিপল এপিসোডস অফ দিস, কারণ অনেক কিছু শেখার আছে। আর আমি অনেক এই একটা এপিসোড যেটার জন্য আমি অ্যাকচুয়ালি প্রিপেয়ার করে এসেছিলাম। আমি নর্মালি আমার টিম আমায় খুব কমপ্লেন করে যে আমরা সব প্রশ্ন করেই লিখে নিয়ে আসি, সেগুলো নিয়ে আমি কোনোদিন পড়ি না। কারণ কি আমি বেশিরভাগ সময় লোকজন যারা অ্যাপ্লিকেশন নিয়ে কাজ করে তাদের সাথে কথা বলি, এবং তার সাথে আর অ্যাট দি এন্ড অফ দ্য ডে আই ক্যান অলওয়েজ হ্যাভ আ কনভারসেশন অ্যাবাউট এনিথিং অ্যান্ড এভরিথিং অ্যান্ড সামহাউ মেক সেন্স। আরে তোমার সায়েন্সটার মাথা মুন্ডু যদি আমি শুরুর জায়গায় না বুঝি তাহলে আমি শেষটা যাবো কি করে? সো আই হ্যাড টু ডু সাম লিটল বিট অফ রিসার্চ, অ্যান্ড পার্ট অফ the research was also visiting your lab, কারণ ওইটা না দেখলে আমি কোনোদিন বুঝতাম না যে
I would like people to take a look.
হ্যাঁ, আমরা এটা করি, এটা let's do a visit Chinta day, you know, where we can
take a look.
And let's I will arrange it.
We need to demystify this. একটা আমাদের দেশে প্রবলেম আছে, অন্য জায়গাতেও আছে, এখানে বেশি, যে we look at this as sort of ivory tower, distance একটা remote,
ivory tower-ই মানে একটা বড় বিল্ডিং, তার একটা
কিন্তু মানে basically this is, you should be able to touch and understand this science. This is touching, we want to touch people's lives, right? So it has to be at a human level, there has to be a connection
by touching their brains.
This is because it cannot be remote. Societal involvement in this has to be there, right? Otherwise this will never get to the next level.
And Kolkata in general with academic research
there's a lot of respect.
There's a lot of respect.
Lot of respect.
I mean, কিছুদিন আগেও ফ্রান্স থেকে একজন মহিলা এসেছিলেন, she was working on linguistic anthropology, আমার যতদূর মনে হয়, we were having a conversation about it, and she said, oh, some of the greatest minds in that field are actually in Calcutta, and we have a you know, there's a conference happening with 400 of the world's greatest people right now in the city. I mean, I was quite blown away by it, but to me, you revalidated my assumption on that people take Calcutta very seriously when it comes to...
No, I think Calcuttans take science and scholarship very seriously. There's a deep-rooted respect. I don't know. I was talking to your colleagues and I talked to other people. I find it deeply intriguing and very touching, because despite all the challenges this state has gone through, what is remarkable is that parents, ordinary families, they want their kids to do well in education. That value system somehow is very deeply rooted, and that translates into respecting science. Or আমাদের সেই বইমেলা তখন ময়দানে হতো, আমার তখনও মনে আছে যে এই কম বয়সী ছেলে ছুটে বেড়াচ্ছে কোনো কবির কাছ থেকে অটোগ্রাফ নেওয়ার জন্য। You don't see that anywhere, right? That doesn't happen.
দেশের বাকি জায়গায় তো তুমি এই কাজটা করলে তোমাকে নিচু করা হবে। ওরা this relentless pursuit for knowledge is something that is also very inherent to Calcutta.
You need talent. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. You need young, motivated, gifted people, and Bengal has an endless supply of good students. I am so impressed with what the schools still produce, despite all the challenges that are there. At a supply chain of endless talent, in this state, which populates all the institutes in India to a level of 60-70% of any institute. Can you just imagine? Just do the proportion of that to figure out a choto state এইভাবে পপুলেট করছে। উই নিড টু ট্যাপ ইনটু দ্যাট।
সেখানে যারা কলকাতাবাসী তারা কি করে এই স্টেটের প্রতি এমন একটা তাদের হাবভাব যে না আমাদের আর এখানে বেঁচে থাকারই কোনো লাভ নেই?
I would not look. I understand that there is despair and there is hopelessness, and but what I'm saying is that the fundamentals are still there. They're strong, right? মানে এই নেচার বলে পাবলিক জার্নালটা আছে না, highest sort of scientific journal. Nature does an index for the best science being done by a particular city. This year, in India, Kolkata came first above Bangalore. It displaced Bangalore to be number one, which is surprising. And a lot of my friends যারা ব্যাঙ্গালোরটা দেখেছে, আমি যে এসব খবর দেখিনি কখনো, তারা বলে আরে শোনা ব্যাঙ্গালোর থেকে কলকাতা গেছে, এটা হয়ে গেছে না, ইয়ার রাইট, পুল মাই লেগ, ডু হোয়াট ইউ ওয়ান্ট টু ডু। But then it struck me, I said that's very interesting. So I think Telegraph did an interview with me where I talked about it, and the fundamental is that why shouldn't Kolkata be? এখান থেকেই তো সব ছেলেমেয়েরা কি সব জায়গায় কাজ করছে, দেশের মধ্যেও দেশের বাইরে। So we have it. We just need to reorient and give confidence and hope that it can be done with the right support system. এবং সেখানে আমার মনে হয় citizenry, societies, private foundations, leading members of society should help that process.
Thank you for helping me segue into my last question, which was about patronage. আজকে তুমি যে কাজটা চিন্তাতে করছো সেইটা যদি পূর্ণেন্দু চ্যাটার্জি না থাকতেন সেটা হতো না সেটা। এবার পূর্ণেন্দু চ্যাটার্জি is a singular entrepreneur who has done exceedingly well in his lifetime and has taken it upon himself to contribute to the future of the world through science and
Right.
through research.
And he has a deep love for science
হ্যাঁ,
and ambition, right? He dreams big, and he
Right.
dreams for this city. He
So-
wants to do it here.
একদম উনি
Right.
আর উনি কলকাতাতেই করার জন্য, তাই জন্য
হ্যাঁ,
কিন্তু
absolutely.
টিসিজি ক্রেস্টেড ডিমড ইউনিভার্সিটি কলকাতাতেই হয়েছে অ্যান্ড উইচ ইজ বেসড অন রিসার্চ।
আমার এখানে আসার একটাই প্রিকন্ডিশন ছিল, ওর সোনাটা তুমি ব্যাঙ্গালোরে করতে পারবে না,
রাইট,
তবে কলকাতায় করতে হবে। অ্যান্ড আই সিম্পাথাইজ উইথ দ্যাট সেন্টিমেন্ট। ওর বাড়ি আর আমার বাড়ি তো 10 কিলোমিটার অ্যাপার্ট ইন বীরভূম, হাটশিরিন্দি, আমি শান্তিনিকেতন। হ্যাঁ, সো সামওয়্যার হি হ্যাজ দিস ডিপ লাভ ফর দ্য স্টেট হুইচ আই রিয়েলি অ্যাডমায়ার।
তো আমরা কিভাবে এটাকে ইনস্টিটিউশনালাইজ করতে পারি কলকাতা শহরে? তোমার এই আগের যে আমাদের পডকাস্ট করছিলাম, উই হ্যাড সামবডি এলস হু ইজ রিলেটেড টু ওয়ান অফ দ্য বিগেস্ট অর্গানাইজেশনস ইন দ্যাট দ্য সিটি হ্যাজ অ্যান্ড হ্যাজ এ ন্যাশনাল আউটরিচ এটসেট্রা। কলকাতা শহরে যে পয়সা নেই এই জিনিসটাও ঠিক নয়।
না, ঠিক
এরকম অনেক অন্টারপ্রেনাররা রয়েছে যাদের কাছে ভুরি ভুরি পয়সা রয়েছে। আর দে নট আস্কিং দ্য রাইট কোয়েশ্চেন্স অ্যাবাউট দ্য ফিউচার অফ আওয়ার সিটি? ডু ইউ থিঙ্ক দ্যাট ইজ আ প্রবলেম? ডু ইউ থিঙ্ক পিপল ওয়ান্ট টু পেট্রোনাইজ perhaps other things, maybe art, maybe culture, আর সেইটা করে কি আমাদের সায়েন্টিফিক রিসার্চ হচ্ছে না? What are your thoughts on
I think it's a
patronism?
very good point. The resources are there. I think the intent has to be there now, right? Sure, I mean, funding art and science, art and music and other things, cultural things, you see an immediate thing. There's a manifestation. কেউ গান গাইলো স্টেজে বসে, you can see the direct link.
পিছনে তোমার নামটা লেখা থাকলো, সেটা দেখে
I will not be able to promise you যে আমি কালকের এই রেজাল্ট থেকে কেউ গান গাইতে পারবে, সময় লাগবে একটু, right? I told you it takes time, but I think if they take ownership and pride that we are doing this, and I'm saying that I have already set up the whole thing, I'm not going to do it, I'm not promising you, I've done it with Punendra's help and TCG Crest. Now if they get involved for particular programs to attract talent back to the city, give it a platform which is solid, certain disease oriented programs, if they're given stable sort of foundational support, যেটা বিদেশে খুব হয়, right? Parents drive things, certain communities drive certain projects. সেটা হলে their ownership is there, they have a skin in the game.
break it down for somebody watching this, an average Joe, somebody, an average bunku in the city who is watching this podcast. They care about the city, they have despair,
Right.
but you as a neuroscientist have the promise of hope
Right.
at the end of it. যেটা কলকাতা শহরেও এটা করা সম্ভব, কারণ তুমি করে দেখিয়েছো, লাস্ট 2 বছরই দেখিয়েছো। How can an average citizen be involved in this endeavor to institutionalize research to help promote that? How can an entrepreneur be involved? Can you break it down?
So the entrepreneurs will have to decide that this is something that they can relate to, because this is affecting our lives. There's nothing more fundamental than your brain getting affected by disease. We are all facing it, in every family has it, right? And it's just like heart or kidney disorders. It's a chemical imbalance. Certain cells are not acting properly. There's no stigma. It's just happening in the brain. So if they pivot now and said, we will energize this research activity by attracting young people, attracting talent back to the city from outside, this is a very good time to do that. Thanks to whatever is happening abroad, right, in the US. A lot of people are now reorienting towards India. There are people going to IT and all that, but there are very gifted scientists who want to come back. So you can imagine entrepreneurs teaming up, saying, okay, we're going to fund a major fellowship program so the financial benefits are ramped up, so that when they come back from abroad, they don't lose financially, and they have an opportunity to do good science here. We build up a program, give them sustainable support. They see a roadmap for 5 years, 10 years. Support a program like that. Bring back home, so return home scientific program for fellowships and faculty positions. Name the chairs like they do abroad. And that's that. That will, you get talented people, the rest will follow. So the least this community can do, especially the resourceful people, is to create programs which say we are behind this. A big brand name, like people who are recognized in this city and outside. If they say, I am backing this as a program for stem cell research on Indian patients with these kinds of programs in terms of fellowships, professorships, exchanges between top universities and Chinta, that would be a game changer. And one person does it, hopefully others do it too. But somebody's got to step up and start doing it. Yeah.
That gives me ideas. I think I'm going to have a coffee with Shonada right after and talk about this homecoming fellowship. I think if we are able to put a structure to it, I think we can get a lot of support from people who'd be willing to fund this kind of research.
And you know what does that? That does, you won't see somebody who gave away. The reason when I came from Bangalore here, a lot of people said, you really here? Oh, okay, maybe I should pay attention to this. So students are coming here. অবাঙালি ছাত্রছাত্রী যারা সাধারণত আমার কাছে ব্যাঙ্গালোরে যেত তারা এখানে এসে কাজ করছে। So that's at a personal level. But if you support a program like this, which is backed by brand names and prestige, a lot of people will come here, right? That barrier will be broken. কলকাতা যাবো না, এটাকে বদলে যাওয়া যায় খুব সহজে। আর সাকসেস ব্রিডস সাকসেস। যেই 5-6খানা ছেলেমেয়ে কোনো একটা জায়গা থেকে দেশের অন্য একটা কর্নার থেকে এখানে এসে কাজ করলো, সঙ্গে সঙ্গে আরও 5 জন আসবে ভালো, and then it rolls on. So we need that roll-on effect. We need to start it. And I really believe এটা সায়েন্টিফিক গ্র্যান্টের ব্যাপার নয়, এটা কমিউনিটি ইনভলভমেন্টের ব্যাপার। If some big names in this city say, we are backing this, here's our name to it, I can match that with talent from abroad and at home.
চলো করি এটা।
Absolutely.
I think there is no better way that we can make our city more relevant by doing this, because এটা আমরা instant gratification, we don't have to pander to the TikTokification of the world.
No.
We don't have to look for immediate results. এক্ষুনি আমার 100,000টা লাইক না হলে আমার জীবনে বেঁচে থাকার কোনো লাভ নেই। এই গল্পটার থেকে বেরিয়ে এসে let's look for a long term development strategy.
যেটুকুন 2 বছর এখানে হয়েছে তোমার পাশের বাড়িতে, if you had told me this 3 years ago, I wouldn't have imagined.
You wouldn't have believed it.
No. I'm quite surprised by it. Pleasantly surprised. I was চিন্তা নাম মাঝে মাঝে রাতে দুশ্চিন্তা হতো যে কি হবে, will this work? Because this is hard work.
Yeah.
This is hard work, high tech
everyday work.
Everyday work, and things don't work according to your wishes. Science is a very humbling experience. কাজ করবে না, logically যাই ভাবো তুমি, একটা something will go off. And you have to go back to the drawing board, figure it out. So you need people who are really making a commitment. They have made that commitment and they can get more. The city now needs to make a commitment.
Wow. With that, we come to a master class. এটা একটা এপিসোড তো হয়নি, এটা একটা মাস্টার ক্লাস হয়ে গেছে for all of us who have some kind of interest in science. We grew up in Calcutta, we grew up in Bengal, but which also means that আমাদের মধ্যে এটা একদম কুটকে ভরা হুয়া है. তো আমাদের মধ্যে সায়েন্স ব্যাপারটা, the love for science. Perhaps if we look at the metrics of success for the film Oppenheimer, আমার তো ধারণা যে ওয়েস্ট বেঙ্গল থেকে যত লোকে Oppenheimer দেখেছে, আমার মনে হয় না আর কোনো স্টেটের লোক এরকম ভাবে পাগলের মতো করে দেখেছে, because we love that science. যেটা বললে it makes sense. আমাদের স্কুলে সায়েন্স পড়াটা has been always seen as a privilege and something as an aspiration. So we've always looked up to that. তো এরকম পরিস্থিতিতে দাঁড়িয়ে আমার একটা নেক্সট ডোর নেবারের সাথে আজকে এই আড্ডাটা মেরে আমার মনটা খুব ভালো লাগছে, and hopefully we'll be able to build this homecoming fellowship where we get some of the bigger names in the city to put their money where their mouth is, and fund research which will have impact 10, 20, 30 years down the line.
And this is not some esoteric science. This is diseases that affect us.
এর খুব প্রয়োজন,
এখনই এফেক্ট করছে, এবং it only the burden will increase.
And if not us, then who?
For example, Parkinson's সারা পৃথিবীতে হচ্ছে on average, studies have been done in populations. Onset of Parkinson's in the Indian population is 10 years younger. 40 is the average.
40?
Yes, just think about that.
তুমি বলছো আমার 6 বছর বাদে একটা they'll have a higher proclivity to.
না কেন? You know why? Because it is comorbid with diabetes and hypertension. আমাদের dietary ব্যাপার, right? It sets, the whole bar goes low. I looked at the data, this population data from foreign studies, international agencies, and I said, wow, this is home now. This is hitting us now, right? So one of the SCA-12 patients samples I got, I said, wasn't this guy young? I asked Rishikesh, he said, yes, but he's gone downhill in 2 years when he gave his blood, and now it's different, right? So this is not some abstract, esoteric, high science pitch I'm making. This is here and now, and we are ready to go with it.
মানে জম্বিরা তৈরি হচ্ছে, apocalypse is coming.
And I think people just need, actually there should be pride and urgency, both. You want to do science, you want to help science, but there's an urgency to this. It is a health crisis. Yes.
So let me go back and digest some of this information that I have gotten today and work on what we've promised. We come back with a blueprint on this together. Yes. Up until then, this is Meghdut signing off on this episode of Make Calcutta Relevant Again, the podcast. Don't let your curiosity die. I guess, যেটা শুরুতেই ছোনাদা বলেছিল না যে the imagination needs to fly like there is no tomorrow.
Right.
If you're able to do that, then in our own ways, we shall be able to make Calcutta relevant again. Till then, see you.
Thank you.
Make Calcutta relevant again. You already know. Relevant again.